Hello, I'm joined here today by Josh Connolly. Josh is a life coach, a keynote speaker and founder of COAisathing, which is a website helping young people with parents who are alcoholics. Now Josh, I first introduced you at the Mental Health First Aid talk that I saw you do, which was really good. I mean, you came in, you didn't necessarily have anything prepared, but you just blew everyone away. I mean, you just sat there and told your story and it was incredible. And I think what stood out to me most was how much work I could see that you've done yourself, because you remind me in a way of like a lot of mates that I knew growing up and stuff like that. And to see someone from the sort of background that you've had articulating with such a high level of emotional intelligence was just really impressive. And I mean, you left and everyone was just gushing about how good you were. We had a lot of speakers on the day, but you did really stand out. Obviously you had sort of an hour then, but just briefly, can you tell us your story?
Yeah, so I grew up with an alcoholic father. So my dad was, he was like quite a chaotic drinker, a chaotic influence on my life. And the behaviours and everything that came with that kind of shaped the way I grew up really, although I didn't know it at the time. He spent a lot of time in and out of prison, and eventually took his own life as a result of his drinking, drank himself to death. I mean, I saw him take an overdose, which I thought was the moment that killed him, but I've since found out that he went on to live for another day or two before he went. But once he went, because of the stigma and everything that's around mental health in general, but especially addiction of any kind, we never ever spoke about it. So by the time I was 11, 12 years old, I didn't even really know that I should have had a problem with what had happened. I thought I put it to bed, and I never associated with the ways that I acted and the things that I did as a teenager with what happened when I was younger. But essentially I spent most of my life running. I was running away from feelings and emotions, and the person that I became and the things that I did were all a mask and a way of running away and escaping the ways that I truly felt. And I guess that's why, to reach the stage that I've reached in my life now, that's why I'm, so focused on trying to be as authentic as I can, because my problem's always been running away from that. Yeah.
I think a lot of people have an idea of what it might be like to be the child of an alcoholic parent, but what is the reality? What is your life like, sort of on a day-to-day basis, growing up with your dad the way that he was?
Well, for a while it's normal. Yeah, because when you don't know anything else, then your own life is normal, isn't it? But it's less about the drinking. See, people often want to hear the stories about what happened when he drank. You know, what was it like when he drank? And there was us being upstairs and hearing chaos and windows smashing and furniture breaking downstairs. But the reality is the behaviours and the feelings that it creates around it. The coming home from school when you're not quite knowing what's going to be going on in the house. So I became very good at reading situations. I became very good at reading people's faces, because as parents, my mum and dad were under terrible stress from my dad's drinking, and so they were doing their best to try and protect us from it. But what that actually meant was a lot of secrecy and a lot of denial of what was going on. So as my brain was developing and I was gaining a sense of what the world was about when I was younger, it was all warped. So my behaviours and my coping mechanisms were all quite dysfunctional. So what I was doing to survive and make my way in the world was different to my friends at school. So even after my dad died, I had a feeling that I was different, that I didn't belong. I always had the ability to fit in, because I'd had to, even at home, I'd had to feel like I was pushing myself into something that wasn't my space. So I'd always had the ability to do that, but I never felt like I belonged. I never felt like I was part of anything. So it's less about, the fear and the trauma of what happened when my dad was drinking, and more about the behaviours and the dysfunction that comes from that, and what it done to me as a person.
Did you have a lot of anxiety and stuff growing up?
Yeah, I was very anxious, but I didn't know that it was anxiety.
Yeah.
A way I got hold of my anxiety was through anger. So I would often be angry and I would often be kicking off and starting fights and things like that when I was at school, or escaping into drinking drugs by the time I was 12, 13. I didn't know that I was acting on anxiety. I can only see that now.
Yeah.
We never spoke, when I was at school, we never spoke about what anxiety felt like. The feeling in your stomach, the tightness in the chest, the shakiness in your arms and all that stuff. I thought that was a personal defect that only I suffered from because nobody else spoke about it.
Yeah.
And if I was angry and kicking off or doing whatever I was doing, as much as it got out of control, I was still in control of it more than this anxiety that used to overtake me, especially when I was at school.
And I mean, one way of sort of masking that is developing an addiction, which you did do yourself. And, some people would say, seeing what your dad went through, you think the last thing you'd want to do is have a drink. But addiction obviously can be such a powerful thing, and it could be partly genetic, it could be learned behaviour. Obviously, in your case, would you say it was a way of masking pain?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so when my dad died, when I first got to senior school, when people started, because you're starting to talk about what you're going to be when you're older, I was just going to be someone who didn't drink and was going to raise children. That's all I wanted to be, was a dad and not alcoholic. I wanted to be something different. However, I was naturally drawn to the escape that drink and drugs offered me. And because I don't feel like, certainly at the time when I was at school, there's a real and true open conversation about drink and drugs, I felt like I was being lied to. So we were told about all the bad things that drink would do and all the bad stuff that would happen if you started taking drugs. And I'm sat in school thinking, well, I'm doing it on the weekends, every weekend, and I'm not none of this stuff that you're telling me is happening. But it changed my life. Drink changed my life, and it worked. Alcohol worked, right? It was interesting. I was at an event not so long ago, and it was a children's mental health event, and one of the speakers got up and she came on straight away. She was all jolly, and she was like, right, I want you to think of something, a good memory from your childhood. Don't think about it, just the first thing that pops in your head. So everyone done it, and then she came back and she said, right, I'd imagine you were thinking of a holiday or when you went to the beach, and I thought the first thing I thought of is when I started drinking. Because that was the first good childhood memory I plucked out. And that was because drink made me feel connected, it made me feel part of the world. It did everything that was missing from my life. So it's no wonder I became obsessed by it. Now, I battled with all my life, why am I doing this when I've seen my dad do it? He gave me the perfect example of how not to be, and yet I'm doing the same thing. People talk about learned behaviours and things like that. I believe I acted exactly the same as my dad because I suffered from the same thing as him, which was untreated trauma. And I always compare it to, if you had a physical trauma that you left untreated and you started acting strange, people wouldn't think it was peculiar because they would see this physical trauma that's got infected, it's never been treated, it's just getting worse and worse and worse, and everyone would be like, help this person, he's clearly in pain. But because I was suffering from an internal trauma, it looked like I just needed to get my stuff together, yeah? Everyone goes through bad times and you need to pull yourself together. And that wasn't the case. I was suffering deep emotional pain that I wasn't even allowed to look at, really. And with that, because I learned what society wanted me to do, right? Society wants you to be brave and overcome adversity, right? So I learned very, very early on that a good way of hiding what I thought was my weakness, what I thought was my defects, what I thought made me pathetic. When people asked me, if I said something like, everybody has difficulties in life, I lost my dad earlier, but I'm going to make what I can of it, people would congratulate me. You're so brave, I can't believe you can say that. When really they should have been, it's putting the onus on them, but people should have been saying to me, hang on a minute, you're 12 years old, your dad drank in the way that he did and you lost him early, there's something wrong here that you believe yourself to be so well together. And that's why I believe now, when I ask people about their traumas of their lives, when they say I still really struggle with it or it's hard on me, that impresses me more than someone that says, yeah, it's all gone and I'm okay with it. I'm impressed by the people that are able to sit with the pain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sometimes it takes some courage to actually be in that space, rather than sort of, because that's kind of deflecting it in a way, as if you say like, no, I've had this thing happen to me, but I'm moving beyond it.
Yeah.
It's like, are you really though? Have you really taken that time to process it?
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of us have a drink at weekend and things like that, and when we were younger, we might have drunk a bit more. But what is it that actually defines an alcoholic? Is it how often you drink, or is it how you act when you're drunk?
I would say it's the reasoning behind it. And I guess in many ways, the term alcoholic is too restrictive because people want to define that. I think we should talk more about a relationship with alcohol, yeah? So, you can have a real severe problem with it where your body is completely dependent on it, you're completely dependent on it emotionally, and that's going to be top of the scale, yeah? Where you're in full-blown dependency. But you can also be on this spectrum where I'm not using alcohol to enhance my life, I'm using it to get level, yeah? I'm not physically craving it, I don't need a drink in the morning, it's not overtaking my life, but I'm not surviving certain situations without having a drink. That in itself is an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, because you're starting to rely on it to get you through certain situations. So the question of how would you define an alcoholic, I wouldn't define it. I would define, we should all define our own relationship with alcohol and why we are using alcohol. I always say you could have one glass of wine every night, right? And if you're sitting with your family and you're having one glass of wine sat at the table, and you have one glass of wine every day, but it's sat at the table, it's with dinner, you're not bothered whether you get it or not, but it does enhance dinner, it's something you do, it's a bit social, might make you feel a little bit relaxed when you have it. There's fairly low risk of that having any effect or impact on your family. If you're having the same one glass every night, but when the kids come home, you're rushing, you're irritable, you're restless, you want to get the kids to bed, and then at 7 o'clock, if they haven't done their homework, you're saying, it's too late now, I'm having my beer now because I need that beer, or that one glass of wine, yeah? And you're pushing the kids to bed, and they can see that you're angry and you're irritable, yeah? And they're already starting to recognise there's one thing in your life that makes you feel okay, and it's not your children, or it's not your wife or your husband, it's that one can of beer or the wine. So it's the same amount, but it's a completely different mindset, different behaviours, different emotions around it. So for me, it's nothing to do with quantity, and more to do with feelings and emotions and the reason you're doing that. And that goes beyond alcohol, by the way. You can be doing that with anything. Yeah. Behaviours, being nice to people, food, sex, cigarettes, mobile phone. Yeah. One we're all doing. There's going to be so many children who are suffering in the next 10, 15 years because their parent has never looked up from their phone. So they've got this idea that there's something in there better than them. And I am guilty of that today. So yeah, it's more about the behaviours and feelings.
Brilliant. And obviously your drinking, it started off as just like a weekend thing as a young kid, but then it developed into like a problem, I guess. Like what changed in your head? At what point did you acknowledge that this was a self-destructive behaviour?
I always knew it was self-destructive. Okay, so the first 2, 3, 4 years, maybe not, yeah? I felt like it was just enhancing my life, and it probably was. Monday to Friday got better because I had something to live for and to be excited for, which was alcohol on the weekend. So in itself, that was already unhealthy, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like it was enhancing my life. By the time I was 18, 19, I knew drink was causing problems within my life. However, it was way more painful for me to just be sober. For me to just, I could do I crashed cars, woke up in hospitals, woke up in cells, woke up in houses I shouldn't be in. I'd done all that stuff when I was drinking, and as horrible as it was, I could just about manage that. I could do that, just about cling on to life like that. What I couldn't do was normal, everyday living. I couldn't live day-to-day life without something to take the pain away, something to take me out of myself. So I always knew it was a problem, but I always felt like the bigger problem was me. So it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as it could be.
How did you start to get off it then?
Well, I used to, in the pub that I used to drink in, the owner was, or had been a compulsive gambler and had stopped. He's a really charismatic guy, really nice fellow, I've always related to him. And he used to tell his stories in the pub, of how he used to be and how he was now, and I felt like I was similar. And I started to think, well, his life seems to have changed since he stopped doing it. Perhaps that could happen for me. It started to come in the back of my head. And he used to look after me, never judged me, never pulled me up on my drinking or anything like that. But I kind of always knew that I felt like he had compassion for me. He did have compassion for me. Anyway, one night, it was all felt like it was falling apart for me, and he asked me if I felt like I might have a problem with drink. And that was the first time I ever, with any conviction and meaning, said to someone, yes, I feel like I might have. And that was because he accidentally, or just because he was a nice guy, or perhaps he'd done it on purpose, perhaps he knew what he was doing, but he created a space where I felt like I'd be heard for the first time in my life. And so I answered him honestly. And then the next day he took me to a 12-step meeting, and I never drank again after that.
So you just went cold turkey completely?
Yeah, I just stopped, yeah.
Was it tough?
Emotionally it was tough, yeah. So I never became, I had periods where I was clearly physically dependent on drink, because I would drink and then I would have to like rattle off it, and I'd have all the dry wrenching and everything that comes with it. But it was about how emotionally dependent I was on it.
Yeah.
And I was completely dependent on it in that sense. So physically coming off of it was probably not as difficult as you can imagine. But emotionally, well, it ruined me coming off drink. As you've heard my story, the first time I ever really I'd always thought about not wanting to be here, and I'd had suicide thoughts all my life. But 9 months after stopping drinking is when I planned to take my own life, properly planned it for the first time. And that's because all the feelings came back. Yeah, everything that drink had been masking and hiding, you took the drink away and I was just left with that. So my survival technique was gone, and that's when I planned to take my own life.
So the key thing really is to deal with the emotions and not get into this state in the first place. So how do you then go from that, all these emotions and feelings coming back that you've just repressed for years, how do you deal with that?
Well, that's been a process, yeah, and this is what I'm continue to learn throughout my life today, is learning to be at one with the emotions that I don't want to be with, yeah, the difficult ones to face. They're the ones that they're the emotions that will kill me, and they will kill me, and I mean that literally in the literal sense. Society is geared up, we're all geared up to never feel bad. You should be trying to feel good all the time. And that's not real, and it's unrealistic. And I ran away from my emotions. Now, when I was younger, because things got so tough for me within my house, yeah, and they became so painful, we talk about fight or flight, and I couldn't do either. I couldn't run, and I couldn't fight, and I couldn't ask for help. So I detached from myself. And in that moment of detaching from myself, I gave up the right to feel anything. So I needed to begin to come present and start to go through my emotions. We talk about the term overcome emotions, and even the language is wrong. I've never overcome anything. When I overcome something, I always have to go back to it because I've not gone through it. So I personally started doing mindfulness, and I started through getting quiet and allowing my mind to slow down. Feelings started to come out of me that had never come out of me, and I had periods of time. So the first time I done it, I was shaking and rattling, and all these emotions were coming out of me. And this was like, I'm 2-3 years sober, so this is nothing to do with drink or drugs or anything. This is emotion, and it scared me a little bit, but I felt much better after it, yeah. So what I started doing is every morning I was setting an alarm for a period of time where I would try and slow my head down. It wouldn't work every time, but over practice it gets better. I would slow my head down, and I would let the emotions, when the emotions come, I want to fight them, I want to push them back down, I don't like the feel of it, so I want it to go. I'd allow it to come up, and slowly I started to go through these emotions and build resilience around them and build a comfort with them. And in that, all the positive emotions that I was missing out on start to come back as well, because I was getting back attached to what I had become unattached from, if that makes sense. So when we hear so much about how you need to be positive and get at one and realise what you're grateful for, it's actually been different for me. I've had to process all the stuff that I'm ungrateful for, get at peace with the stuff that I'm angry with and all my negative emotions, and in doing that I've reconnected with myself.
And now you've been through this long process and you've settled a lot of things in your head. How do you feel towards your dad? Do you blame him for what he put you through, or have you come to sort of accept that he was unwell and dealing with trauma?
So in some ways I've been fortunate that I've gone through what he went through. So it's the whole kids in glass houses don't throw stones. Right? I can't sit here and blame him when we both suffered from the same thing. However, I now am very comfortable at recognising the adverse effect that his behaviour had on me. So I don't like the term blame. My family were under heavy stress as a result of my dad having a problem with alcohol. I'm upset by some of the ways that even my mum handled it, and my mum is an amazing woman who I love very much, but it's been a landmark in my journey to understand that being upset with the way someone dealt with something doesn't mean you love them any less, doesn't mean you think any less of them. It's just acknowledging that the effect that it had on me, and it's turning it and facing it and owning it. Someone once said to me, if I accidentally dropped a brick on your foot, you would know I did it by accident, but you'd still need to get your foot sorted out, right? And that's true. So there's all the emotions there. I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm ungrateful, I'm all them things, but I'm okay with them, and it's what I do with them. I stare them in the face, I sit with them and I accept them, but my behaviours that I have as a result of them is no longer going out and having a fight because I don't know what else to do with it. It's going on social media or any of the platforms that I've created and sharing it, and everyone going, oh, wow, that's how I feel too. It's so refreshing to be able to own something like that.
Well, one thing you've started doing is Freedom Fridays, which you put on your Twitter page. Moving on to the work you do, tell us about COAisathing.
Yeah, so it started off as a blog site that I wanted to carry on the work that NACOA had done, and I believe when I found NACOA, which is the National Association for Children of Alcoholics, when I found that charity, I could not believe that nobody had ever told me what they were telling me, because it might have saved me so much pain, or at least made me feel less alone. Yeah. So I felt like there was a message there that needed to get out. So I thought, because it affects my everyday life, a blog's a perfect space for me to start writing about it daily and how it affects me. So I did that. I called it COAisathing because I had just found out that being the child of an alcoholic is actually a thing. And I started it on my mobile phone. I didn't even have a laptop at the time. I just started on my phone, started blogging, and it started gaining some momentum, and people were saying to me that they'd love to share their story, but they don't feel ready to put themselves out there like that. You've got to remember, my dad passed away so long ago. I've reached a stage where I'm able to do it for different reasons, but people wanted to share it anonymously. So I said, well, why don't you share it on here? If you send it to me, if you're happy for me to read it, I can post it for you, and nobody ever has to know who wrote it, but you get the opportunity to own your story and share it with the world. So I posted that I was going to do that, and I just couldn't believe how many stories come in. And that was, the blog's been going for nearly 2 years now. We've posted over 100 posts now. We're up to around like 80,000 hits. It's gone worldwide, so we've got followings across Europe, across America and Canada, Australia, India, Gambia. We're getting hits everywhere. Yeah. Alcohol is the great leveler. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. And off the back of that, you go around and give talks in schools as well, is that right? Or just in general?
Yeah, so I've done, I'm beginning more and more now to do stuff in schools. I've been doing stuff with professionals and just at conferences and things like that. And obviously I've got into the coaching with it all. And I found my purpose, yeah, and I found the reason why I'm here, why I've been put on this planet, and it's it's exciting. I'm sort of humbled and really sort of grateful that I get the opportunity to use my experience to change stuff, and what I'm really about is questioning everything. Do you know what I mean? Because some of the things I was taught when I was growing up by good, well-meaning, loving people was wrong. It didn't work. It was coming from an angle of love, but it was coming from an angle of someone who hadn't been through what I'd been through, and the techniques that you might use with people that are having struggles from one angle. I'm not going to work on someone, you know, like me who was really struggling with trauma, which is a whole new level. So I'm more about trying to be open, trying to be really gut level honest, and it's surprising actually when you talk about honesty how difficult honesty is, real honesty, you know. And that's what I try and do when I give talks. As you know, unless I'm doing a workshop where we do some PowerPoint stuff because it's more interactive, but just the talks, I go up, and at the moment when I'm introduced, I don't know what I'm going to say, because I like to try and make it as authentic as possible. I know my story, I know who I am, and I know what's happened to me, and I try not to filter any of it.
Yeah, I mean that's what really resonated with me when you did the talk, was that a lot of people went up with these flashy presentations, and that's fine, but you just came in, you sat down, you didn't even stand up, and you just told us your story, and you held everyone in the palm of your hand for a good hour and a half. That you left, and everyone was just silent for like a couple of minutes. They were just like, wow, that was incredible. So it's really good. You talk about purpose. I just want to bring you to one of your Freedom Fridays. The last one you released, you were talking about how your why and your purpose and all that sort of stuff. Really, it's largely about how you want to be remembered by your kids and your legacy sort of thing. And obviously you've got 6 kids, you're a young man, clearly very busy. And how are you raising your kids to, you know, help bring them up with resilience, kind of skills to not develop into the same problems that you've had?
I like that question. So within my family, I talk about family healing, yeah? So this isn't all about me getting better, it's about us healing together, because 4 of my children were born when I was in my darkest days, you know, so they were here, so they would have suffered as a result, and they would have been impacted. So firstly, I've got to get honest and open and acknowledge that, not in a morbid way, not in a way to beat myself up, but I have to recognise that they will have been affected by what happened, and so with that, I can recognise that we can change that. So as much as I impacted them in the way that I was, I can impact them in the way that I am, and so I'm conscious of it. And within the family home, I'm probably overly mental health orientated all the time. You know, they get that. My daughter says, "Oh, here he goes with his dad talks," but it's important to me, and it's important to me to let them know that they can have their range of emotions. We play games at dinner where I'll say 3 things that make me happy and 3 things that make me sad, and I'll slip something in there that I think will really resonate with them, just to show them that the stuff that they maybe don't feel like they want to talk about, that they're not the only one, that they're not alone. It doesn't make them weak. And my boy, who struggles probably a bit more than anyone else, I give him a little bit more attention when we get opportunities together. When it's just me and him, I'll let him open up. I've been teaching him some breathing techniques, which he said are really helpful, and just giving him the opportunity to talk and let him know that I'm not judging him. I'm not coming from a place of judgment. I'm coming from a place of allowing him to explore and be curious about the ways that he feels, and let him use his own resources and his power to gain resilience against them, so that he can start processing them as he grows up, you know, rather than running away like I did for 15 years and then having to come back and deal with it all in one space. I'm hoping that what I do means that he's gradually gaining that resilience.
Well, at the very least, he might see this one day and think, you know, my dad was all right.
Yeah.
He was trying.
If nothing else, he'll have this video. Yeah, which will be good. Yeah.
So finally, if people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
So my website is just joshconnolly.co.uk, and my surname's CONNOLLY. That's got my story on there and the links to all my social media, and all about the coaching that I do and everything else like that. I am on Twitter, which is @COAisathing. Facebook, if you search Josh Connolly, you should find me. LinkedIn, and then my YouTube channel it's best to find that. I've only just recently started that, but it's best to find that through my website because it's one of them funny links. But yeah, it's all on there. I'm very, very active on there. I'm always doing as much as I can every time. Every time I learn something new about my inner world, I try and share it with everyone else so that it might create a way of somebody else finding something out about themselves.
Lovely. Well, Josh, you're amazing. Thank you so much for coming down and doing this. It's been a real pleasure to meet you, and best of luck.
Thanks. Yeah, cheers.